Now, Alex, let's move on to Armenia.
It's a twofer, Mike. It's the first time in a quarter of a century keeping close tabs on both of these neighbouring countries, former Soviet republics in the Caucasus, that they've both come to the boil at the same time. Some similarities, we can go into more of the nuances in extra time again, but what's happened this time is following last year's loss of an extraterritorial exclave of ethnic Armenians in Azerbaijan, called Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh, and the absorption of over 100,000 refugees from there into Armenia, which doesn't really want to keep them, the government doesn't. There's been huge social strain. Azerbaijan, an oil-rich dictatorship, has been pushing now for Armenia to concede some of its border territory. In the tri-border area, not far down the road from here, between Georgia, Armenia and Azerbaijan, some border villages in the Soviet era were not marked on the map as part of the Armenian Socialist Soviet Republic. And the government of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has now agreed in a demarcation exercise as part of a peace suit with Azerbaijan to hand them over. Residents of those border villages in the district or the province of Tavush got together with their local archbishop, Bagrat Galstanyan, and marched on the capital, Yerevan. So Freedom Square, Yerevan, and Freedom Square, Tbilisi, are both full of rioters and have been for the last few days. I won't cover it in as much detail as Georgia, but we'll see now a few seconds of a war dance called the Yarkushta, which was danced by students dissenting against the government of Pashinyan and welcoming in these marchers from the northeast when they turned up in Yerevan. They were apparently threatened with suspension for this show of support, but that was later revoked. So here they are dancing or beating the literal war drums. Not everyone, even among the opposition in Armenia, would like Archbishop Bagrat Galstanyan, because he has now stood in Republic Square, the other main square there in Yerevan, and said he wants to form a transitional government. Some of his supporters literally walked out on him for that because they thought this was a ploy to create an insurrection. Meanwhile, though, the Armenian Prime Minister, who's causing all these ructions, has been off in not-so-sunny Copenhagen, where under the chairmanship of the Dane who used to be not just Danish Prime Minister but also Secretary General of NATO, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, he was interviewed, and we'll hear a clip in a moment. So Rasmussen took the stage here on the second day of the Copenhagen Democracy Summit under the slogan, "Dictators need not apply," and the YouTube speech and the whole day will be in the show notes. What did Rasmussen have to say? Well, that is usefully taken apart by an excellent blogger, that'll be in the show notes too, called Moneycircus, a gentleman based here in Tbilisi, a British expatriate. And looking at what Rasmussen said in this moment of doubt for Armenian stability, he says what a suitable venue this was held in, the Royal Danish Playhouse. He quotes Rasmussen as saying, "Armenia is a democracy in an incredibly difficult neighborhood. Europe," he means the EU and NATO, I think, "must do all it can to support Armenia's democracy and geopolitical pivot." And he's talking about Rasmussen as a third-rate politician. So there's nakedly here the suggestion that if the EU and US don't like what is happening in Georgia, they sanction the governing politicians and they just flip to Armenia. And as a result of that, you will get the oil flowing through Armenia probably instead of Georgia, and Georgians no longer being given the carrot of nice access to the EU. He goes on to talk about Rasmussen as really wanting to say roll up for the war and surrounding Russia with prickly little troublemakers. And he says deeper down is the giveaway that the Georgian opposition here, not in Armenia, says that they want a decentralized Georgia. Now, both of these countries have very roughly the population and area of something like Ireland. So trying to make a federation out of that, and Yuri Roshka will give the details in tomorrow's part 2, is a recipe for disaster. You're always going to get some regions which go with the pro-Western camp and others that go with the pro-Russian. So Moneycircus says that this will be breaking up even the smallest countries, perhaps with the aim of creating hotspots and flashpoints with the long-term objective of breaking up Russia. He then says, and perhaps we'll talk about this in extra time with Vanessa, that it's exactly the same policy that the US has pursued in Iraq and Syria, which is we'll hold on to part of your country and create a very vibrant opposition there, which wants to give it natural resources and human resources straight to the West. He says if a country is no longer entire, he's thinking here of Georgia, Armenia now, but it's happened to Syria already, it can't be retaken by a single leader, whether nationalist, populist or otherwise. What did Pashinyan say on the stage yesterday in Copenhagen? We'll have a listen now. So sorry for the lack of introduction there. This is just the bridge there. This is what the Georgians on the stage in Copenhagen were talking about, linked by Moneycircus, and they're all specialists in changing hearts and minds. But we'll now listen to Pashinyan talking about the EU. I apologize if the sound didn't come over very well in that clip. That was a mistake I didn't notice when I was queuing it up. But he was asked, when would you like Armenia to join the EU? He says, right away, this year, and got a big round of applause for it. He's put his foot in it, as Pashinyan, by saying that the Armenians were probably somewhat responsible for the genocide that was brought upon them 100 years ago. And so that's being reported on even by Politico now in the EU. I apologize about the people behind me. I can't do anything about that. And that has brought about a condemnation even by the Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention, which is suggesting that Pashinyan has really gone too far this time. Again, more in extra time if necessary.
Yes, thank you, Alex. And we will now move on.